Welcome and congratulations. You have discovered another meta egg. That's what you've discovered. They're hard to find. We thank you for joining us. And if you have never joined us before, let me introduce Meta Egg as being your home for insane fan theory. Now, the thing with insane fan theory is they may or may not be true. And then that means that we can say anything we want. But sometimes we have to bring on some experts so they can like test our theories and shoot holes in them. If you don't understand the title of this whole entire show is going to be about the Tales of the Empire that came out on May 4th in 2024. So if you're seeing this in the future, then we're kind of doing this a little retro style because that's what we do here. We're kind of inspired by Ready Player One. So we go and look at things in the past and we're not always keeping up with what's on the cutting edge. And that's where our guest comes in. It's because he is a expert on all pop culture references dealing with Star Wars. Hello, Star Wars Santa. How are you today?
I'm doing quite well. Happy Friday.
Thank you, and happy Friday to you, sir. I didn't even realize this is the second Friday we've done this in a row, and we're kind of like continuing the conversation we had last week. But the reason you're here is you give me this value. Now, you were a little bit gratuitous on how you were talking in your show that you just did earlier today on you were Meta Egg. Now, Will, he's really good. He's smart. He's on a different level. But honestly, like you're on a totally different level when it comes to knowledge about legends and the toys and the history and the first appearances. And even on your Patreon, that's basically what you've done is like made audiobooks. Do I understand that right?
Yep.
On
I'm
all
taking the Kindle version of the books and showing that on the screen and giving my summary as well as reading parts of it of the chapter. So it's not like I'm not audio drama acting out word by word every word of it. You can get that on Audible or whatever.
right.
I'm just going through and saying, okay, here's what happened in this chapter, going page by page, so that
Do you
folks who
do
want
like
to read it.
breakdowns on like what you think happened or what that
Yes,
could mean as you read or
exactly.
okay. Okay.
Exactly. So
But
as
that's
we
like
read
that's
along,
valuable. That's
yeah,
yeah.
there's some clues that I try to make connections to the clues to things that we've seen before or things that we might see as we go along. Yeah.
All
So
right. So, without further ado, so we don't bore each other, I'm going to try to get this image that you gave to me through Dropbox.
yeah.
But I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked because our topic is Tales of the Empire. And I asked the chat room earlier. No one has responded yet. Hopefully we get some or some people will give us a comment if they watch this later. But what do you think as far as like not necessarily your expectations if it met them or not, but overall rating 1 to 10 for Tales of the Empire?
So just a little context on how I'm scoring these is I put them within context of themselves. So understanding they are what they are. So I'm not comparing them against a movie or something like that. But for the short story context that they are in the stories that they told, the first three, if we want to cover these in story arcs, I gave a 9 out of 10 on all three of them.
9 out of 10 for all. Okay,
Yeah,
which wow, that's
so
high.
each of the Morgan Elsbeth episodes, 1, 2, and 3, 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10.
Barris not the same.
Barris, no, I gave a 9, 9, and 8.
You
The
didn't like the
finale,
last one. Is that
well, I
in
knocked it down because of a little piece of is Barris alive or dead? That's a little too
bro, she's
we
got to be dead, man. Not every like dude,
yeah.
Qui-Gon Jinn is looking pretty lonely as the only dude who dies from a labor like saber into his stomach. Everybody else lives. Come on.
I think she's dead. I think she's dead. And I think there's a reason for that. And I had a discussion with Baymax
Icon.
on private chat right after the episode that what we were seeing in the modern Star Wars era are lightsabers becoming more saber than laser. Right? Like this is a laser sword. You hear Luke Skywalker say, what am I supposed to do? Take my laser sword in and do this. And there's other times in the original trilogy where they called them laser swords and stuff like that. So what we see is more sword than laser. And, you get stabbed with a sword. Maybe you die, maybe you don't. Right. In at least in my estimation, one of the issues a lot of folks have taken with like a sword stabbing, like a lightsaber, more specifically, stabbing, is the heat of the plasma. Right, blade should boil most of your innards. But if you look at some of the things going back even to the prequels, when Qui-Gon is cutting a hole through the wall in Phantom Menace,
Yeah.
and he's got his hand like 2 inches from that molten steel.
And it's not burning his hand. I know.
Steel. Right. Now there's been an explanation that says, well, in the hilt it does a protective cover for the person holding the blade. But what about the steel that's melting? Like if I put a welding torch up against a piece of steel and I start heating it up until the point where it starts melting the steel, that steel is going to be hot, right? Like the heat coming off the steel alone would be enough to burn you. But you say, okay, well, you can explain that. They're still covered by that hilt's protective.
Are you doing like some weird physics stuff here? Are you saying that the lightsaber melts but does not burn?
Well, they're saying that the hilt provides a protective. It's got a barrier that it emits that protects the person holding the saber. That's been a thing that people said for a long time.
So going back and throwing back to the series, what you're saying is that you don't like the last episode because it's incomplete, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because somebody in the chat room basically compared it to Jedi. And do you think that Disney paid more attention to Jedi? Because it's basically the same setup, right? There's two individuals. There was Ahsoka was basically the focus of one series, and Dooku was the focus of the other series. And you can see that each of these posters are kind of like named after the aspects of each of those episodes. But if you go back and you look at the Empire poster, there's only one of them. Like they didn't really push this as much as Jedi. How do you compare it to Jedi in your opinion?
I heard a really good breakdown of this, that in Tales of the Jedi, we know a lot more of Ahsoka's backstory, her entire story arc, and even post Clone Wars animated series. We have Ahsoka content in the form of novels and Disney Plus series. So we know a lot more about her. Same with Dooku. We have a lot more context with him as far as books and things. So people have had a long time to build some headcanon, some additional information that fits into their overall story arc. In those those 3 short episodes just fill what we already know. So they don't feel as incomplete, even though they're the same as these Tales of the Empire, because we don't know hardly anything about Morgan Elsbeth, for example. We know a little bit.
We have the Mando series and then her trip to Narnia and Ahsoka, right? But then that's her death, right? She dies in Ahsoka. My linear here? But okay, so Hmm.
But in
There
Barris
is a
Hockey,
long history with Barris, though, because if I'm correct in my research, Barris goes back all the way to Clones, at least Clones, right?
yeah,
The movie Attack of the Clones.
right. And the thing with her is we knew her story up to a point, and that's been very well told to us in the
Clone
Clone
Wars.
Wars animated series.
Right, right.
But the point where she gets put in jail and hauled off, we don't have anything else on her. She doesn't show up in a book, in a comic, in a novel, nothing, right? And nothing. So
Okay.
that part of her story's been incomplete. And where Tales of the Empire picks up is where she was arrested all the way through her presumed death, right? But we don't have the pieces in between these short little animated stories to fill in the gaps. On Tales of the Jedi, we were just filling in gaps of knowledge we already had. In with Barris, not as much. So for me, they're the same. Like Empire and Jedi, they're the same. They're these short stories that tell just a small snippet of like a beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
They're incomplete. That's the format of the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to give you all the answers. It's not going to fill in,
I had this
every.
I had this thought that the tales of, because we have the tales of the Jedi, the tales of the Empire, we could have the tales of the Rebellion, you could have all kinds of different, and it's
Yeah.
almost like acts as like a vehicle, like what ifs act to Marvel in a way, because
Yeah,
it fills in a couple of holes with just these concepts and ideas, but mostly what's going on is like character development, right? Because in Dooku's, you got to see a lot of the motivation that this character, but I feel like that happens also here with Morgan, because even though Morgan is basically like, I guess what you would call like a Favreau Filoni character, it's like a Mandoverse character, right?
yep,
Now you
yep.
understand like a lot more of where she got to where she was going and what her motivations were. But I also have some cool comparisons. First, let me keep us on task because we don't waste too much time here. And I'm going to try something. If you excuse me, there's going to be a weird transition here, but keep your eyes on the screen, people. And I'm going to show you a scene. Okay. All right. Now, listen. I mentioned this because of something you said earlier and a different show of yours. And that was the topic of the portrayal of Grievous in certain IP.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask, my friend, how did you feel? This guy gave him a little bit more menace, didn't it?
It absolutely did. This is probably the best short Grievous story we've seen in any series. I'm very specific in what I'm saying there. Right?
I'm
There's
happy that
no
you say
Grievous.
that, and I was hoping that you'd like that because, dude, he's kind of ruthless. Like you get pissed off at him in this.
Right, and you should. All right. There's always been the notion that the villains in the prequels, told three different pieces of Anakin as Darth Vader. Right? You had Grievous as that mechanical, the piece where he's actually Vader, right? And Dooku, uh, the um, the master, the Jedi master, and then uh, Maul as the Sith, right? So you put all three pieces together, you get Vader. But the part of Grievous that we've seen has been largely um, he's supposed to be menacing, but he never actually does anything menacing, right? He attacks, he gets defeated, and he runs away over and over. Even in the prequel movie, when we see him, he doesn't really accomplish anything. We see him
Right.
show up. you know, he's a really cool figure in that he
Right.
wields all these lightsabers. They spin around, great fun. But then Kenobi dispatches of him pretty quickly in the scheme of things, right?
Well, I mean,
So
that happens a lot. It even happens with Morgan to a certain degree, but
yes,
I think it's interesting because I'm a big fan of Battlefronts 2, and that's actually one of his like super moves. Like each character has 3 super moves. Anakin gets 4, but one of Grievous's is basically this what he calls like the spider crawl or him running away. Like that's like his superpower. But in this episode, really and truly, like right off the bat, you're just he's scary. He's got this authority. He's not coughing. He's not sick, and he's causing a lot of damage, man.
yeah,
And but here I got a comparison I want you to think about. I looked at this picture, and maybe I'm late to the party on this one. I could be totally, but I have a theory after just seeing him in this cape and the way his face is. I think he's Nosferatu. I think that's the little connection. That's the sync right there. Like, come on, what do you think on a scale of 1 to 10? What do you think? Is it possible that the inspiration for Grievous comes from the old 1920s black and white film Nosferatu?
see, this is where I talk about your intellect being on an entirely different level. Mine is because I'm old and I've seen a lot of stuff. Yours is just because you're so dang smart. I put now that you show me this, it looks spot on.
He's
I
scary. Like,
and
I think of him
knowing
as a
well, knowing how much George Lucas stole from other things, right? Like
right.
flat out just ripped off from other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tarzan, the list is long.
the list is long. I think you are onto something, my friend.
Oh, good, good.
It looks fantastic, and I am not at all. I wouldn't question at all that George Lucas absolutely stole inspiration
I'm gonna
for.
look and find it. I'm gonna find it. I bet you it's out there somewhere in some like reference book that Grievous comes from Nosferatu. But I want to ask you about this weapon too, because I don't know if we've seen this thing before. I didn't even look it up, but there's basically like the Dothamirian like force magic sickle. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, yeah. It's imbued with Night Sister magic,
Right,
right?
which makes it go up against the lightsaber. What do you think
Right.
about that? Do we have a new weapon or a new I mean, it has like a power bar on it. Each time it gets struck, it kind of goes down in power until the point where she's defeated. So
How fun would
again, like
that
that
be?
scene has a very
Yeah,
video game feel almost.
well, that's what I was going to say. Wouldn't it be fun to see that in a video game?
Right, it
Yeah.
would work. It's a very balanced weapon. Like all of the weapons that go against lightsabers can fight against lightsabers, but they all have like their limits to how what's the word, effective
Effective.
they are against. Like
Yeah, yeah,
there's a way to beat them. So
yeah.
I don't know. I liked it. And basically what I'm talking about is when uh, Morgan's mom faces Grievous. And then once Grievous, we're just spoiler alerts the whole episode. Once Grievous kills Morgan's mom, which basically creates this trauma in her character, she takes over the sickles, right?
Yep.
And let's see. We might be running on time. Oh, okay. So I won't show another scene from this one just yet, but I want to talk about these these introduction. I don't think that they're an introduction to the series. Mountain Clan we've talked a lot about. Like
Yeah.
um from what I can gather, like that came from a game, I think. So it's
Yeah.
not it's do you know anything about this?
I do not. I'm
Because I
not
want to
on.
know the Singing Mountain Sisters, I think is what it's called. Here, let me bring you back up so we can talk about this.
Like,
There we
I'm talking to nobody. Yeah.
go.
No, no, I do not think that we've seen them in any series. And as you I think I don't play video games for reasons. Right, like,
Reasons.
no, I've got a bit of an addictive personality disorder that causes me to get, and I
You
had
can't
to
play
cut
it.
them off. Like back when I was in the army, I used to play video games a lot, but then I
That's
couldn't
fine.
quit
They
it.
create like there's a degree of happiness that is generated from video games. Like people talk
Yeah,
about flow states and all of that, but
yeah, and escapism and all that.
this is like a
And
card game, I believe. I don't know that because I'm not really sure if the Mountain Clan that's in the with the ladies in the Empire storyline are the same ones as the Singing Mountain Clan that I looked up on Wikipedia, because it's talking about a Dothomirian clan. And see, you can see here, there's a good picture. I love this picture of one of them riding a rain car. Look at that. I think that
yeah,
comes off of the game.
yeah.
It's like a picture that's on the game, sort of like magic or something. But I don't know. I wonder if that's the same clan or if he's joining them together, or if there's multiple clans. Like, I don't know, the whole idea of like multiple clans on Dathomir with the night witches and the women in the clan, and then there's, I believe that Darth Maul is from Dathomir, so there's like this whole like airbender, like I smell the airbender, the last
You-
Avatar.
and you're on the Legends tab there. You got to pay attention when you're on Wikipedia. There's two tabs, right? There's
Okay.
Legends and Canon, and you're on the
Okay.
Legends tab there. But the fascinating thing about and you just triggered a bit of a squirrel chasing down a rabbit hole
That's
because
what we do here at Meta. We're in the rabbit hole looking for Easter
so,
eggs.
so who are the natural inhabitants of Dathomir? There
Right.
you have Zabraks, right? So Zabrak, like Maul
Marl.
and his brother, they have these horns that like go around their head, right? And they
Right. Right.
grow as they get older. Then you've got Night Sisters. Night Sisters may have come from the other galaxy and then inhabited Dathomir. So who are the original inhabitants? Are they Zabraks? Are they the Night Sisters? And why are the men all Zabrak and the women all Night Sister? Night Sisters are not Zabrak,
And they're
right?
separated too, right? They're
Yes,
separated.
yes. So there's a discussion to be had around that, but in a lot of legends go back to Dathomirians uh, uh, riding
Rain cars?
rancors, rancors. Yeah, and
Oh,
it's
rain cars are from Dathomir too? See
yeah.
that?
Well,
Zabrak, the Darth Maul. We could have a Darth Maul character riding a rain car? Like,
you could, but in legends, you kept seeing where Night Sisters would ride them. Even in the books that I've been covering on my Patreon, the Fate
that's
of the
nuts.
Jedi, part of the Fate of the Jedi books, they talk about the legends of the Night Sisters riding these rancors. So that's a long history that goes back in legends. In canon, it's not so much, and it's unclear whether the rancors derive from Dathomir or like we have with my
Because they're
my
everywhere. They're
favorite
even in Narnia.
my favorite blurgs, right? Blurgs, we see them on different planets in different contexts. So it's unclear to me if rancors come from Dathomir, but certainly are on Dathomir, and at least in legends. And
Oh,
the
I'm gonna
Night
change the
Sisters.
screen here again because it brings up a good deal, but you can keep talking if you want because I cut the sound off of this one. So I want you, because we're talking about like what are the abilities of the Dathomir ladies, and basically we see one do like this force. I mean, what I would basically call an EVP, like a electronic, whatever they're called, electronic pulse that cuts out all like that would be very useful in the Clone Wars because
Well, fascinating part about that is it appears that the Mountain Clan are light force users, and when you
right,
see her use that like EVP power, it is
right,
light. Right? It's pure light emitting from
right.
her.
It doesn't look like the same magic as the Green Night Sisters magic, right?
Right. So much like we have with Force users, so light side Force users and dark side, where we call them Jedi and Sith. You have light side Night Sisters and dark side Night Sisters who use the Force from each perspective, not as the religion of Jedi and Sith, but rather in their own ideology, their own uh, uh, theology, right? If we want to put it in theological terms, they have their own religion that connects to the Force, but in a very different way.
I think that one of the main things that I'm like concerned about though is like the Jedi can't know that that's possible, because if the Jedi knew that was possible, they would just be popping off EVPs or whatever, like during the Clone Wars, whenever anybody was around. You get what I'm
Well,
saying?
that's because they have different theological perspectives. So I'm a Christian, right? And
But
we
of
have
course,
different
it's very powerful. Wait. Before you get into like, if you start glowing on screen, Santa. No,
well,
I'm
I'm
just
just saying,
saying, like, it definitely had a toll on the lady. She did not survive the EVP. So even
right.
if it's a one-shot deal, but are you
Well,
saying that Jesus can make an EVP too, Santa?
no. I'm just saying, like, Christians have a connection to God through Jesus. We believe in Jesus, Son of God, part of the Trinity. We
Right.
also have Jews who believe come from the same tradition,
Oh,
and
I
we
see where
have
you're going.
Muslims who come from the same tradition. We all have different beliefs. We all have different practices. We all have different ways we interface to our deity through our religion. I believe mine's the true religion, but we don't need to debate that. That has nothing to do with this. We have Jedi and Sith, and Night Sister and Mountain Clan Night Sisters, who all are interacting with the Force in very different theological ways. They have different belief systems. They have different.
They've figured out different stuff to use it for. Like they have
Yeah,
almost like different powers and different
yeah,
focuses.
yes. They all have different rules. They all have different beliefs. They all have different practices. And the reason Jedi don't use some of those is because it's not part of their religion. It's not part of their faith system, and so those powers aren't something that they would access in the same way at all, right? So to your point about using this like EVP wave, well, we've never seen that from anyone else, but apparently the Mountain Clan Night Sisters, at least the mother of that, right, the matriarch of that, can access that power.
Okay, so let me think
It's a
here.
different faith, right?
Right, different philosophies,
Yes.
different ways of like it's very airbender. I gotta admit though, it doesn't really
Yeah.
like, in my opinion, it doesn't
Well,
really change the Force. It kind of
no,
adds to the lore of the Force.
it does, and like go to the Chiss in the books. They also access the Force, the female children primarily, and they're able to navigate vessels through hyperspace without a hyperspace map. Right? They don't
Right,
have to
very Dune.
calculate it. Yeah, and those Chiss Skywalkers are able to navigate at hyperspace by using the Force. Well, we see Darth Vader learn that in the novels, but we've not seen other Force users, Jedi or anybody, use the
Well,
Force
just we've
that
come
way.
as the world between worlds or whatever, and that might not even be related to Force. However, of course, the Emperor was using Night Sister magic to get into there, so we know that the Emperor knew certain Night Sister shit.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we got to keep moving on because even though we're dealing with less until we get to like the last one here, each episode, I got to keep this moving.
Yeah.
Then in the next episode, I don't know, it's the second one with Morgan, and we discover her talking to the Empire right off the bat in the first scene.
Mhm.
She's no longer a kid, she's a little bit older, somewhere in her 20s, and she's trying to make a deal with the Empire to use, is that her home? It wouldn't be her home planet. It's whatever planet she wound up on.
Yeah, Corvus.
Corvus is the one that we see in first, I think it was in no, it was not in Ahsoka. It was in Mando 2. Season 2 is when we first
Corvus. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Corvus's first appearance is when Ahsoka comes upon that little city, and it's all desolate, and there's like dead trees, and she's got these little robot guys that protect her, and those little robot protections guys are still in. We see them in Corvus. We see the town people of Corvus. But we also see her doing plans for the TIE fighter. I thought that was very interesting because TIE fighter, like as far as I can tell, its first appearance again is from a video game.
Well, the TIE Defender that's in
TIE Defender there. Thank you.
Yeah, the TIE Defender that she's proposing to them is the one that Thrawn is championing in Rebels. Throughout Rebels.
That's right. Holy crap, you're right.
Yeah, he's pushing
that.
Pushing it. And it shows up in the novels as well. And in the novels, there's this pull and push between him and Tarkin on funding. Tarkin's always trying to steal funding for the Death Star project, right? So in the novels, you get more of that, but you see it also in Rebels. So these TIE Defenders, now they're tying back to Morgan Elsbeth, that in some way she's involved there. Now, I'm going to tie this back.
Basically, the plans are her, because that goes to the storyline of what happened to Corvus. Corvus is basically, she's saying that we can make these things cheap because we'll just lock down one whole planet that has all of the resources. So we don't have to get the resources to make this from other places. And then the Empire goes, well, screw you. We'll cut out the middleman and just take over your planet. We don't care.
So Arenda Price does the same thing in the Thrawn novels with the planet that Ezra Bridger's from in Rebels. Lothal. So in the novels, the Thrawn novels, Arenda Price is a very similar situation. She's from Lothal. In her family's mining is taken over by the Empire because they're like, let's cut out the middleman, and they start mining. They take over all the mines. Arenda Price eventually joins the Empire to get to this position so that she can oversee her family's mine. And then she's fighting to get projects funneled to Lothal so that her people can benefit from it. We get the same story going on here with Morgan Elsbeth, who has somehow gotten connected to this planet of Corvus, and whatever the history is, we don't know. But she
basically takes it, because I figured out that's where the spear comes from. I figured out that's where the bell comes from, because they're basically a metal town that has like all of these different rich things on this one planet. So the Beskar that she has doesn't necessarily come from Mandalore. It could come from Corvus.
It could, absolutely could. That's a good point, Will. So I don't know for sure, but that's a very good theory. So we have a very similar storyline with Morgan Elsbeth and Arenda Price in this second one. And most people have seen Arenda Price, Governor Price, in Rebels. She's in Rebels and in the Thrawn novels. So you get this in this snippet, but we don't have a lot of story around it. And she's just trying to direct everything to Corvus the same way Arenda Price was trying to drive everything to Lothal.
Okay. All right. So now I'm about to show another clip. This clip has to do with two subjects we need to talk about, but one is that this did not go down that way, that there's a different deal that Morgan makes that ties her to Thrawn, right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's go ahead and I will make this bigger. We'll go over here. This one does not have sound, so I'm just going to explain that they send an assassin, and we know this assassin. We know this guy right here, and I think that you know a lot more about him than I do. So I really wanted to ask you about him. So what happens is Morgan bests him. And then that scene is like a test. And then Thrawn comes out of the shadows and is like, "Oh, I had this all planned. You passed my test. Now you can be my assistant." And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, boom, they enter and then that whole city is like locked down by the Empire. But who is that guy? I know we saw him in Rebels. Tell me more about
fascinating, fascinating story about him. He originated in the original Thrawn trilogy back the era of the Empire. He's a species called Nogri. And the Nogri were on a planet that the Empire had. There was a war that took over place, similar to Jakku. Right, there was this war that happened. It desolated the planet, and the Nogri lived there. And the Empire is presumably planting resources so that it'll recover, except they're not really not. And the Nogri are this warrior type species. And this guy, Rook, he is Thrawn's personal assistant, like assassin guy. They're very effective assassins. They can fade in and out. They've got the technology to make them invisible, like a cloak, invisibility cloak. And they in the heir to the Empire, Rook ends up assassinating Thrawn because he learns that the Empire is actually subjugating his planet, not bringing it back to life.
The same scenario as what's happening to Morgan's planet, basically.
Essentially. So this is what makes him really fascinating, because they're borrowing like all these pieces from different things, right? You can see it. I keep mentioning these other resources. So Rook comes in. He's Thrawn's personal assassin. He dies in Rebels. So it's not like the books at all. But he's still that assassin. And what you see is Thrawn, even in there, but he's taking people, he's taking species from planets that are being subjugated by the Empire and building loyalty with them to him. And it's interesting when you start to put it all together, right? You get the Nogri, you get like here we know that Morgan's motivation is revenge, right? What they did to Dathomir when she was a child, killed her mom, right? She's not loyal to the Empire as much as she wants to destroy the Empire from within. And we also see in the novels he does the same sort of thing. So he's building all these people, and they mention how the Emperor is evil, and he acknowledges the Emperor is evil in the books, and he wants to eventually come to a position of leadership from a benevolent dictator kind of perspective, where he can lead them in good, right, versus evil. And he's taken all these persecuted groups and building loyalty by defending them, raising them up, mentoring them. So that's this Rook guy, right? He's a Nogri. His planet is being subjugated by the Empire. He's Thrawn's personal assassin, and he gets him to fight Morgan to see if she is a capable warrior. And then secondly, when he interrogates her, interviews her, so to speak, she first says, "Well, I'm loyal to the Empire." She says, "Oh, you're lying. Try again." And she says, "Well, because I want revenge." He's like, "Great, come on the team. Be part of the team. You fit right in. Really good."
All right, so now I got one more clip for you. I think that this is from the next episode. Like, we gotta hustle, or we won't even get to Barris, man.
I know.
So, all right, so here we go. Let me see what this looks like for a second, and we'll press play and make sure the sound is off. This is the next episode. There's a dead body on the ground. That dead body is the New Republic people who come to talk to Morgan about her dealings with the Empire, right?
Yep.
Basically, and Morgan says no. She says kill them all, and then she even blows up the damn shit. And if I remember, the person who's coming on behalf of the New Public was actually in the town already, if that's correct. Do you know who that person is, or is that a new person?
He's like the mayor of the town.
Oh no, not that guy. I'm pretty sure that guy might be in Mando. Well, I
Yeah,
think
he
he's
is.
like you see him, but I'm talking
Yeah.
about the New Republic representative that's
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
alien
She
blue.
was she was from there, and then she joined the rebellion, and then they won, and then she came back. Yeah.
Right. So we're past the rebellion, right? We're past Yavin. We're probably they're burning the trees, and that leads right into Ahsoka, right? When Ahsoka shows up, there's the
Yes.
trees burned.
Yeah, in the Mandalorian season 2, right when they showed up on Corvus, and those woods are devastated. Interesting thing here too that mirrors Arinda Price. I keep bringing her up because Arinda Price is just as ruthless as Morgan Elsbeth is. It I find it fascinating that they're mirroring these two characters like exactly after each other, just
Oh,
different
well, I
people.
have a new twist to this, and I'd like to see. Do you know who Hayao Miyazaki is? This
No,
is another reference. Now, Hayao Miyazaki is an artist that was in Japanimation. He's been making stuff like Nausicaa, Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, which came out in, I think, the US in like 97. But he's an animator's animator, so to speak. And individuals have used him specifically. Filoni has used him as like a reference before, but it was during this episode that I realized that Morgan's story is basically inspired by Lady Eboshi from Princess Mononoke. And I'll read you a little bit of it so you understand is that she's a tough, arrogant woman who wants a positive influence the world. As a leader of the Iron Town, which is where she takes control of, it's this town that harvests the whole metal of around the area and creates like a distress on the land around it. It becomes all smoke filled and there's like factories in the background. It's basically what happens. But she's also known for taking what's there and making a new age weapon that like is basically killing the old way of the samurai, so to speak, if you get what I'm saying.
yeah,
Like she's but I'm what do you think of the theory? What do you think of the theory? She's basically using the minerals and the to see how the forest basically tries to take back over because them mining has destroyed like the earth spirits and stuff.
yeah. Yeah, that's a fantastic, Will. I love it.
Awesome.
I suspect because of Filoni's deep connection to animation and to you go back to Kurosawa and all of that that's tied back to Star Wars, that yeah, that they're borrowing this theme of a character. I also find it interesting that the character was developed so much by Timothy Zahn and Arinda Price that does a similar thing. So
And so Filoni probably took both the inspiration from Hayao Miyazaki and then kind of like grafted that on into the story of Thrawn. And then when he got the ability to use Thrawn, he just mixed it into his already existing and folded into
yes,
more lore.
yep, I think so. He took was Zahn's idea of Price, his this idea, mixed them together and created Morgan Elsbeth. Fantastic.
Okay, let's see. Let's say, yeah, okay. This is the two topics that I wanted to talk about extremely with Barris. I mean, there's a whole bunch we could talk about with Barris, but I just wanted to run through her sister her history that you kind of already mentioned. Her sister. What am I talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first appearance I got is right here in the background. That's her master, and there she is in the background of this would be Attack of the Clones, right? Or
Yeah.
Revenge of the
Yeah.
Sith. The Jedi continue to fail to
That
detect the
this
Sith.
looks like one of the cut scenes from Revenge of the Sith.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. But there she is, and then her story was developed in Clone Wars, and she and Ahsoka were like comrades. They grew up together, like went through the academy together, right?
Exactly.
And then there she is seen with the temple guards because she basically frames Ahsoka, which was a plot that I guess was manipulated by Palps to basically drive a wedge between Anakin, because Anakin viewed what happened to Ahsoka as like the Jedi, another failure by the Jedi.
Well, yeah, that's the great thing about Palpatine is the multi-layered aspect of him. Like there's so many, it's peeling the onion, right? There's just layer after layer of plot. But the primary plot of her motivation was that the Jedi were being subjugated by the Republic as an arm of the military to enforce Republic rather than and to be generals in a war rather than keeping peace. They're actually um, exacting a war, not maintaining peace. Quite the opposite. And she becomes disillusioned in a similar way that uh, uh, Count Dooku gets disillusioned with the Jedi Order. And she's like, they've lost their way. They're off point. They're following the Sith. And she even says that in her speech. She says, the Jedi are being manipulated by the Sith to do the bidding, right? And
Right.
and so
well, I mean, you bring up a good point, because a lot of people's critique of the entire series had to do with like it being focused on this redemption of Barriss and this idea that everybody gets redeemed in Star Wars. But in a way, what we're actually dealing with is like on a long enough timetable, there's character development to where they don't feel the same reason, or they don't feel like they're things that they used to think that they were justified in doing are no longer justified once the time changes.
Yeah, they get more of the story, right? So
Right.
you're in the middle of the woods and you're like, you see this part of the story, so you change location, see another part, and as it starts to shape itself, your understanding shapes itself, and then you kind of shift as you learn, right? So that's what we see with her. She starts off by saying, "I joined the Jedi to maintain peace."
Right.
They're being manipulated by the Sith to extract a war. And so she leaves. She gets arrested. She does all this stuff, sets up Ahsoka, which also works, as you just said, as a wedge between Anakin and the Jedi. All of this starts to work. And then, but if we just focus in on Barriss, she was always wanting to maintain peace. Right. And so when the inquisitors come and get her out of jail and say, we're going to have you work for us, as she begins to learn what that means, she says that's not about maintaining peace either. First, it was like peace through strength, right? The same idea that Anakin had. Like, if they can't agree, we'll force them to agree. She's like, okay, if they won't comply, we'll force them to comply. And she starts off that way. But then she sees, even once they said, we will comply, right? That's what the villagers are like, okay, we're going to do what you say. And this guy here that you have, before it says, okay, I'll do what you say. And then they kill them anyway. He's like, okay, this is not about maintaining peace. It's about, killing. And it's not what she signed up for.
Yeah, because you bring up some good points. We're not just dealing with like Barriss's. We're not just dealing with Barriss's redemption. We're also dealing with Lynn's redemption in a big way.
Yeah.
And we already know that Reva went through the same situation. But the only problem that brings to me is like, if the Inquisitors are still around, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the Inquisitors are still around, then the time period that we're dealing here, even though Barriss looks much older, is pre-Yavin, or were the Inquisitors still around at Yavin?
Good. By Yavin, the Inquisitors were gone. Yeah.
Okay.
They've all been. Yeah.
Or they had all just quit the Inquisitors.
The one guy in the Ahsoka series that is also in this trilogy here, who is the gas guy.
Lynn.
No, there's the gas guy, Morok.
Oh, okay.
Morok is in one of the scenes here when she's like bowing to Vader. Morok is to her left, right? And there is, pre-Yavin. Then we see him way after the original trilogy, the Ahsoka, but he's a gas like reincarnate by then. So any Inquisitors that are left by the time you get to Yavin are just one-offs. They're not like part of an Inquisitorius anymore.
Well, this is the steel that you sent to me from Ahsoka. Oh no, this is Obi-Wan, right? This is from Obi-Wan.
This is from Kenobi, yeah.
Kenobi. Yeah. So look, we have a little Easter egg here with Lynn, who shows up in both Empire and here. This is Obi-Wan, but I mean, my opinion right here, right? Because we know, okay, so it has to be, right? So wait, Necromancer has to be reinstated by Obi-Wan, right? Or at least it's in the Inquisitor's lair, which we also see in Empire, right? We did visit there. Am I right? Because we
Yes,
saw the
they
Inquisitor.
were building in Tales of the Empire. They were building Fortress Inquisitorius. That's
They
where
were
they
building Fortress Inquisitorius, which is where
Yes.
Obi-Wan breaks into.
Yes, it's fully
Okay.
built. Right.
Okay. Thank you. Keep me straight, man. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
You got to keep me.
So in Empire, when we see them on Inquisitorius, they're building it. It's before this, right? Just as a
So,
time frame.
okay.
And that was in that second episode, or right, the first episode, second episode. This is when they were building Inquisitorius. The third episode is likely after Kenobi, probably before New Hope.
Okay, so we got to the end of that. So okay, this is what I'm wondering, because to what our conversation was last time was at the end of Bad Batch, which was not that long ago before they released Empire. And sometimes Filoni will ask a he'll drop off with a with a cliffhanger where you're asking certain questions, and then Empire answered a certain question for me on exactly when, like, but it all depends on what that Inquisitor's purpose for chasing that kid is. Like, if we go back to the last episode of Empire and she's in the tent with the parents, and the parents are like, I got to get this kid out of here. There's the word path was dropped a lot. So I wonder, do you think that Barriss was on the path? Was she part of the path?
I'm unclear on that. I think she was referring to sending the kid to Ahsoka, not to
Because
Ventress.
would that be post path then? Would Ahsoka what would be going on in Rebels?
Yes. It's post Kenobi. Kenobi was when the path was mentioned.
Right.
And in that last episode, it's after Kenobi.
Right.
So
okay.
I think we're past that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Not sure if what the path is doing. We've only heard it a couple of times. We don't know the full scope of it yet.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I think I have one more scene, and then I think we can call it. Here, let's look at this. Let's see. Yeah, this scene right here. Now, this is basically, let me go back here. We're going to go to here. We're going to go like this. And look at that. Woohoo, trippy. And then we're going to go back here. All right, we're going to hide this. And boom. I'll turn the sound off so I don't get hit for copyright.
Right.
But I mean, basically, this is what we're dealing with, is the effect that to the effect of, was she going after to kill this kid? And what do you think about this? Because here we have another weapon against a lightsaber, and that weapon is someone's hand. Like, she basically, have we seen that before?
Yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it a few times.
Would remind me.
Well, we see it in we see it for sure in Ahsoka. We see it again in Rise of Skywalker. Chronologically, we saw Skywalker first, but in universe, it would have been in Ahsoka first. But where Ben and Rey are dueling, each of them use the Force against a lightsaber that way.
Okay. Okay. Now I think I remember. But right there's the important scene I want you to see, where she's like, after I go, once I finished with the kid, I'll be back. So the question, are we talking about Necromancer here? Do you think that she's going to kill that kid, or do you think that they want that kid for a special reason? And do you think that we'll see that kid again because of that?
And yeah, Ezra did it with Shin. Yeah, we saw it in Ahsoka. That's what I said for sure.
Okay.
Saber Smith
Where is
nailed it
that?
down
Right
for us.
here? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When he told Sabine to keep his lightsaber, he didn't need it. He
He didn't
used the
need it,
Force
right?
against
And that
Shin.
was a big controversy too. A lot of people said, like, is that goofy? You're just taking the lights. But that basically was a vehicle to give that lightsaber to Sabine, right?
Yeah. But just not to get too lost on that. It's I think when we see, and I have to go back to read the quotes exactly, when the parents are coming to um oh, what's her name? I'm just looking at her there. They're coming to Barris. They are mentioning how the Empire is coming. There must be something wrong with it. I think the Empire wanted to capture it, so I think it goes back to Necromancer. I don't think
Yes.
Necromancer was ever fully shut down. It
Right.
lost funding, but
But it's
that's
a budgeting issue. Like you were talking about Tarkin and how he
yeah,
was managing funds. It
yeah.
looks like there's a tension being by the time of Obi-Wan. And if this is past Obi-Wan, then that means Necromancer's back on. So
Well,
we can imagine, just for the sake of my theory here, that Omega doesn't make it to Yavin, right? I didn't mean to rhyme, but we can imagine that Omega doesn't make it to Yavin, right?
sure.
That's all we have for you tonight, boys. I'm back. Close down the screen.
I threw you a bone last time. I'm staying with it. I'm not going off of that. But no, I think Necromancer's always been on the table. It's just Tarkin is stealing funding for the Death Star project, and the Emperor ultimately is going to have say over Necromancer. It's his own private thing. Whether Tarkin knows about it or not, whatever Tarkin is sort of irrelevant because the Emperor's got his own thing going. And where Necromancer is being housed, who's managing it, and what funds are going to it from where, we don't know. But I think we do have evidence here that the Emperor is at least having, through his Inquisitorius program, some say in collecting these children. In the Bad Batch, we don't really see the Inquisitorius program up and running. We don't see Inquisitors running around, but we do see it in Rebels, and they're getting kids there. They're getting kids in Clone Wars. They're getting kids in now Tales of the Empire.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for a while. It's just my question on is whether or not they're just trying to get rid of all the kids, or if they're still experimenting on them. Because for a long time, the kids, like I think we can agree that Omega is essential, because what basically Omega does is she is like the connection point. She's kind of like the MacGuffin for us to get to the sequels, like for Disney to complete that timeline of where the Emperor comes from and Rise of the Skywalker. Whether anybody cares or political reasoning, the Disney, the whole social engineering, is Disney going to go bankrupt? Put all that crap aside. The reason I like talking to Santa is because we're just talking about the content. That's all we're worried about. We're not really worried about where it's going. We're just kind of chronicle, like, so this might not be important to you. Star Wars might not be important to you. So what? It's how we explain meta eggs. We'll talk about Star Wars again. But I want to thank Santa for coming with so many presents. You're giving me gifts, man. You're giving me a lot of stuff that I can bounce off the wall, and I hope others can listen to and use for later.
Yeah,
and I didn't deny any of my theories as far as we go for this one.
well, I'll say this: the Inquisitorius program we see in other places, and I mentioned this on my stream. There's the Red Blade book that came out recently. They were getting Force sensitives just to accumulate them. They wanted to make sure anybody who had force sensitivity wasn't out in the wild. So they would
Right.
bring them in. They would hold them,
Well, we
like
know they were killing adults. I mean, they're trying to
right,
kill
because
adults.
the adults had chosen a side. But if they could get them as kids, they could hold them, and either they would join on their side of it or not, and then they would torture them. What we see in the Inquisitorius program is they would torture them for months on end until they completely broke them, and then they would begin to indoctrinate.
Right.
So the idea was to get these force sensitives very young so that they could indoctrinate them from an early point
So it
on
might not have
through.
just been cloning. There might have been some reasoning just to like do what they did to the stormtroopers in Finn's time, which was to raise them towards the dark side, so to speak. Just
And to
create
keep
more
the
inquisitors.
right. Theoretically, the Inquisitor program would have just continued in perpetuity, whatever that word. Right. They would be able to keep raising them up. And as
Right.
these died, they'd be able to backfill and just keep them going, keep them going. But
Or clone them. Just clone a whole army of
the yeah,
Jedi
the,
clones.
the Inquisitor
Dark
program ends
side.
up getting shut down. And so what they do, whether they're capturing these kids to throw into the Inquisitor pipeline or into the um, Necromancer project is unclear.
Is it clear on whether or not they're required to wear helmets because of some like insecurity of Vader? Because a lot of almost there's a lot they actually give Barriss a helmet, which it's pretty hot. It's pretty cool, but
Yeah,
I mean that's like a common thing, and that kind of
they all
leads
get
down the
helmets.
lineage to Kylo, you know.
Yeah, it's all part of their uniforms. Why Reva doesn't wear one? Why we don't see that is the question. Because all the others do. Even in the Red Blade book, they all get helmets.
Well,
But
live action is a hard thing because they come into the same problems that they do with Mando. It's like actors. It's the same thing that Marvel deals with characters like Spider-Man, and the same complaints that Batman, such as Val Kilmer, have is you're putting a mask on my main asset, which is my face as a movie star.
yeah,
But they definitely made the point out of doing the animated Barriss okay, they made it a visual context thing for her to put on that helmet, and I wonder if it just has to do with some philosophy of Vader's, like Vader's
doing
mask is
away.
voluntary, so he makes everybody else wear one.
Well, it kind of goes to as well what the stormtrooper program as well is taking away your identity,
All right, yeah, good
replacing
point.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Here is a list of Inquisitors. There we have. Would that be Lynn? Is Lynn the fourth sister? Yep, Lynn is fourth sister. Third sister is Reva, the Grand Inquisitor, who we've seen on quite a few different series. The second sister, who I believe is in a video game. The third brother, we don't have a picture. Third sister is Reva. Fourth sister is Lynn, who we just saw in Empire. Lynn basically, Lynn kind of redeems herself, right? Is she good? Is she anti-Empire once she leaves with Barriss on her back? That's the last
That is
question, and then we got to get out of here.
I think so. Two points. One, I think Barriss is dead. Not everybody agrees, but I think she is. And we don't have proof, but that's my belief. Second is I do think that Lynn has walked away from the Inquisitorius program. And we see her figuratively lay down her blade and leave it in the cave and carry Barriss's body out. That was her change. Yeah.
Killed. Well, let's see. They put Barriss, abandoned the Inquisitorius, killed by Maul, killed by Ahsoka Tano, killed by Maul. Lynn, fate remained secret. How ominous. Look at that. Where's the source for that? Let's go.
Well, they haven't filled in the story yet. So at this point,
Right.
they're just
But
saying,
it's secret. It's
yeah.
secret. Like fate remains unknown.
I can't leave this. I can't. You kind of put it there on the table. Tolkien built this entire world. He had all the backstories done. He had extensive literature that tied into the stories he told. Lucasfilm and George Lucas have never, ever, ever done that. So the stories unfold as they invent them. So that's right now it says, mysteriously, who knows? Next year, we may have an answer and I'll have to go back and change it.
Well, here we go. I want to thank everybody who's visited us in the chat room, anybody who's watching this or listening to it while they're, I don't know, doing inventory in a warehouse or driving in a traffic jam, whatever the case may be. Don't mean to be specific. Well, one of the individuals who are there, the Saber Smith, has said, "This is why I love Santa so much." And that is true for MetaEgg as well, to be corny about it. Like, thank you for joining us and setting me straight. I appreciate it. And I hope to talk to you again soon, sir.
Thank you so much. I always enjoy it. It's a good time.
All right. Keep cracking, guys. We'll talk to you soon.